Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Janmadhyasya yato anvayaditaratascha artheshu abhigyaswarat Tene brahmahridaya adikavaye muhyanti yatsurayah Tejo varimridam yatha vinimayo yatratra sargo mrisha Dhamna swena sada nirastakohakam satyam param dhimahi Nigamakalpataror galitam phalam shukamukad amritadrava sanyutam Pibata Bhagavatam rasamalayam muhuraho rasika bhuvi bhavukaha. So we now enter the 15th chapter of the 9th Skandha of Srimad Bhagavatam. We saw the story of the beginning of the lunar dynasty by the king Pururava and how he fell for Urvashi, and through her he had many sons, and then he eventually died. So now the story continues. Shuka Brahma Rishi says Pururava had in fact 6 sons with Urvashi, and he gives the names of the various sons and their lineage by which the dynasty of the Chandravamsham or the lunar dynasty continues. One important personality that comes is Janu. He becomes a sage. In this dynasty he is born and he becomes a sage, and he is famous because he was able to hold all of Ganga in his palms once, it is said, and that is why Ganga is called as Janavi. There is a beautiful name for Ganga called Janavi because she got into the sage Janu's palms and got out of it. And then the lineage continues, and then there is an important king called Gadhi. This Gadhi is important because through him, 2 great beings come. Through his daughter comes forth the avatar of the supreme being called Parashurama, and through his wife, they give birth to Vishwamitra, the great sage. So that story now comes. First, the story of Parashurama. So it is said that a sage called Richika, he wanted to marry Gadhi's daughter. Gadhi had a daughter called Satyavati, who was a very beautiful princess, and this sage wanted to marry her. So Gadhi was not very keen because he thought, how can this sage take care of a beautiful princess who's my daughter? So he put some unreasonable conditions that you have to bring 1,000 horses which are pure white in color, but only their one ear is black, and you have to bring in such a way 1,000 horses for you to get qualified to marry my daughter. This is the price you have to pay for marrying my daughter. So one interesting thing we see here in Vedic culture is the father of the daughter gets to demand money if he wants to set a condition for his daughter to be given in marriage. Whereas unfortunately it has completely reversed now in the recent few centuries perhaps, where the bridegroom's family demands money in the form of what's called as dowry, which results in a lot of anxiety for the girl's family in many cases. This is not seen in the Puranas. In fact, the opposite is seen here, where Gadhi demands a price to be paid for offering his daughter in marriage to Richika. And the sage Richika also duly obeys that because he's got special powers. He approaches Varuna and thereby he gets the 1,000 horses as demanded by the king Gadhi, and then the king had to agree, so he marries the princess Satyavati. Now, because this Richika is a great sage, Satyavati is also duly serving him, and once Satyavati's mother, which is Gadhi's wife, comes to visit the daughter and son-in-law, so it turns out that Satyavati's mother, that is Gadhi and his wife, didn't have a son, and Satyavati was married to Richika, as we said, and the mother has come to visit. And so he, being a sage of special powers, he said he'll prepare a special oblation of rice and milk and so on, which can, when consumed, give the boon of having a son. So his wife also wanted a son, and his mother-in-law also wanted a son. So he prepared 2 such oblations, it is said, one for his wife and one for his mother-in-law, and he went out. And he made it in such a way, because he is a Brahmana sage and his wife is married to him, he made the oblation for his wife in such a way that will give rise to a son with a Brahmanical qualities. and the oblation he made for his mother-in-law, because she is married to the king Gadhi, and they would want a Kshatriya or a warrior son. He made the oblation in such a way that the oblation would give a Kshatriya or a warrior son. This is how he made it, and he left, told his wife that this is for you, this is for your mother-in-law, and he left. But the mother-in-law, that is the mother of Satyavati, she doubted this because she felt that the sage Richika, being the husband of Satyavati, he would have made something very special for her and made something inferior for her. This is the doubt of the woman, Gadhi's wife, which is very typical of one who is caught in such kind of suspicions and so on. Though the sage was very clear, he wanted to just make one with a Brahminical spirit, one with a Kshatriya spirit. But the mother didn't know any of this. She doubted it. So she spoke to her daughter, and they decided in their own wisdom to exchange. So they said, because both are made for both of us, I will have the one made for you and you will have the one made for me. So Satyavati drinks the oblation made for her mother, and the mother drinks the oblation made for Satyavati. And when he comes back, the sage realizes what has happened. So he says to the wife, you have committed a blunder, because I had specifically made it in such a way that the one that was meant for you would give a great sagely Brahminical son, and the one that was made for your mother will give a Kshatriya son. Now it's going to be the opposite. You are going to give birth to a very fierce person who will be a chastiser of all enemies, whereas your mother will give birth to a son, which is your brother, by the way, because when the mother gives birth, that will become the younger brother of Satyavati. So he says, your younger brother will become a great Brahma Rishi. So that is actually what Vishwamitra is. We will see that later, that the mother who took the oblation meant for her daughter, she'll give birth to the sage Vishwamitra, because Vishwamitra is a sagely being who is born to Kshatriya, to Gadhi, but because of the special oblation made by Richika, he has got tendencies of a Brahmana, of a sage, and eventually he will realize those tendencies and become a sagely Brahmana. Whereas here, Satyavati, on the other hand, she has consumed the oblation meant to be given for her mother, which is having the tendencies of a Kshatriya, of a warrior. So he says, you are going to give birth to a son who will be a very brutal chastiser. But then she is not very happy with it. She says, can you do something about it? I didn't know this. Let this not happen. She pleads with her husband. So with his mystical powers, he says, okay, I can postpone it to your grandson. I cannot remove it. You can give birth to a son still who will be a sagely calm being, but he will in turn give birth to a son which will be your grandson, and who will become this chastiser and a brutal enemy of all his foes. Whoever tries to do wrong to him, he will brutally eliminate them. So this is all prophesied by the sage, and accordingly she has a son called Jamadagni. Jamadagni is a sage. So because she got this boon that it will not be her son but grandson, she didn't have a son who was so fierce. She had Jamadagni, who was a sage and who had the qualities of a Brahmana born to Satyavati. And then Satyavati left, and it is said that she merged into the spirit of a river, which is called as Kaushiki, and that is now called as Koshi River. It flows in the northeastern, that is in near Bihar of today, in Bharat. So this is called Kaushiki, by the way, because Gadhi Visa, who is the father of Satyavati, his grandfather is called Kusha. So Kusha came in the lunar dynasty. Again, we are in the lunar dynasty now, starting with Pururava. Many sons were given, and then we saw the sage Janu, because of whom Janavi, the name came for Ganga, and through him came a king called Kusha, and Kusha's grandson is Gadhi, and therefore Gadhi's lineage is by the time called Kaushika, and that is why Vishwamitra will also be called as Kaushika, and the Gotra of Vishwamitra is called Kaushika Gotra. And similarly, the river is called Kaushiki here because Satyavati being the daughter of Gadhi, is also in the lineage of Kusha, and therefore she is also Kaushiki. So the river is Kaushiki, as she merges into this river and becomes Kaushiki. Meanwhile, the son of Kaushiki, or the son of Satyavati, who is Jamadagni, the sage, he marries Renuka, and through Renuka he has many sons. The youngest of them is the prophesied fierce son, who is Parashurama. So the boon that Satyavati got, that this not be my son, and therefore it got postponed to her grandson. So her grandson now, that is through Jamadagni, Jamadagni's last son is Parashurama, who is a partial manifestation of Bhagavan Vasudeva, who has come with the specific purpose of getting rid of all the warrior princes who commit any kind of negative activities, sinful activities. So it is said here, Tasyam vai Bhargava Rishehe Suta Vasumadaadayah Yava Eva Yajna Etesham Rama iti Abhivishrutah. So his name is Rama. Rama means here Parashurama. There are three Rams in Bhagavatam. There are three Rams in our Puranas. The most famous Ram, of course, we just saw in the solar dynasty, Dasharathi, that is son of Dasharatha, Raghuvamsha Rama, Sri Rama, Sita Ram. Then there is Parashuram, who is now born here to Jamadagni as the fierce Kshatriya killer. And then there is Balarama, who is the brother of Krishna, who will appear later. So all three are Rams. When we just say Ram, we normally refer only to Sri Ram, who is Sita Ram. But the name Ram is also used for both Parashuram and Balaram, but it's always qualified. So here he is called as Rama, Etesham Rama iti Abhivishrutah Yam Ahur Vasudeva Amsham. So he is an Amsham of Vasudeva. He is not a full avatar of Vasudeva as Krishna or Ram or Narasimha and so on. He is a partial manifestation, and that is why he is found to encounter even Ram or Krishna, and he is also said to live forever, and he is also said to engage in many activities which are sometimes even in conflict, as in with Ram also we saw how he encountered Ram and challenged him to break the Vishnu bow, which Ram did effortlessly. So he is a partial manifestation and therefore simultaneously present with the full manifestation of Ram and Krishna. So this Parashuram, who is appearing here as the son of Jamadagni, he was specifically coming with the mission of removing the burden from the earth of the sinful or the unrighteous Kshatriyas, unrighteous kings. So normally Kshatriyas are kings who are meant to rule according to Dharma. And today also we see how the whole principle of ruling has fallen down to such levels that anybody with simply greed and corruption and power hungry nature just comes to power without any attitude of service, dharma, and so on. So this was found even then in some kings. Certainly not to the extent it is today, but even then they were all killed by Parashurama. And therefore, Parashurama, it is said, 21 times he exterminated wicked Kshatriyas who had turned hostile to Dharma, who had turned hostile to Brahmanas, and who became a burden on earth. So Parikshit asked, what is the reason why he went about killing them? What was the trigger for this 21 times? So Shuka Brahmarishi continues the story. He says about a king called Kartavirya Arjuna. So this Kartavirya Arjuna is a very powerful king. It is said that he did some tapas. He propitiated the sage Dattatreya, and thereby he got many powers. It is said that he had 1,000 arms. He is called Sahasra Bahu, one with 1,000 arms, very powerful, that is to say. And he was very formidable. He had great affluence, great power, great glory, great fame, great yogic siddhis. He had everything, and it is said that he was able to even stop the flow of rivers, and he was engaged in all kinds of pleasure seeking activities with many women and with jewels and with all kinds of opulences. So this is how he was ruling, and therefore he was unrighteous and he had become arrogant because of the power he got. And it is said that once when he was roaming around in the forest for hunting, he came upon the ashram of Jamadagni, the sage Jamadagni, who is the father of Parashuram. And Jamadagni has a cow called Kamadhenu. Kamadhenu is a cow which can give anything one desires. That's the literal meaning of the word. Kamadhenu means desire fulfilling cow. And this cow is very capable of doing anything that's necessary, and such a cow was kept by Jamadagni here. And therefore, the sage, when he saw Kartavirya Arjuna and his troops come, so he had come with his troops and his entourage hunting in the forest, and he came upon this hermitage. He was hungry. The sage Jamadagni is a very kind person, so he welcomed the king and he gave hospitality to them. He used the Kamadhenu cow to feed all of them. Instantly, there was an army there, and he fed every one of them. Very nice food. Now, seeing this, instead of being thankful and grateful, this Kartavirya Arjuna got jealous that this sage has got such a great cow which is able to feed a whole army, and why does he need it? Because he is sitting alone in this forest. If I take it with me, I can put it to good use. So, with this thought, he snatches away, without even taking the permission of the sage, the cow, and goes away. So, the cow is very essential for the sage. First, because he has to engage in his own dharma, which is to do havan yajna, and for that he needs ghee. So, this is why, by the way, cow is given a very central position in Vedic culture, because all yajnas are done with ghee, clarified butter, and clarified butter can come only from milk of cow, and therefore a cow is essential. Protecting cow and having milk and having the ghee is essential for yajna. And also from a nutrition perspective, cow's milk is the most wholesome food. So for all these reasons, cow and its products are very valued. Also for farming, cow's manure is very helpful. So cow is useful in so many ways, and therefore a cow is valued by Vedic culture, by all the sages. So Jamadagni had only one cow, but this was a special cow by which he could satisfy all his needs for yajna. He could get the milk he has to drink. He could also, as we saw with this Kartavirya Arjuna, anybody comes as a guest, he could feed them with great generosity. So all this was possible, but now this fellow, he took away the cow because of his arrogance without even asking the permission of the sage, and he took to his capital, which is known as Mahishmati. So this Mahishmati is a capital of Kartavirya Arjuna, which is in present day Madhya Pradesh, somewhere in the middle of present day Bharat. So he takes this cow to Mahishmati. Now, after this incident has happened, Jamadagni's son, who is Parashurama, he comes back to the hermitage of his father, and he learns that this wicked king Kartavirya Arjuna came, snatched away the cow, and went. And therefore, he is extremely angry now. We already saw that it was prophesied that Parashurama will appear with great anger and chastise his foes with brute force, and therefore he took his axe, which is called Parashu. So he has an axe, and that's why he's called Parashurama. His name is Ram, but he's prefixed with Parashu because his weapon is Parashu, which is the axe. And with this terrible axe called Parashu, as well as a bow with a quiver full of arrows, he pursued the King Kartavirya Arjuna, and he entered his capital Mahishmati. As soon as he enters Mahishmati, he stands there radiant. It's said that he is wielding a bow and arrow. He's got this axe Parashu. He is wearing the skin of a black deer. He's got matted locks and he's shining brilliantly like the sun. We can imagine Parashurama, he is a partial manifestation of Bhagavan. So he's got tremendous power and radiance in his eyes, and he is got the Kshatriya spirit, so he is physically very powerful, and his body is so radiant and strong, and he's got matted locks, and he's got a golden complexion, and he's got the deer skin wrapped around him. So he is looking overall like a fierce warrior, and This Kartavirya, as soon as sees him, he gets very afraid, and therefore he sends his army. It is called as Akshauhini. And Akshauhini is actually a very huge army. In fact, the specific description of an Akshauhini is given as made of 21,870 chariots and elephants, 109,350 infantry soldiers, and 65,610 horses. This is the calculation of one Akshauhini, very precisely defined in Mahabharata and other Puranas. In fact, in the Mahabharata war, 18 such Akshauhinis were destroyed. So one can multiply 18 by all these numbers. 21,000 odd chariots, 21,000 odd elephants, 109,000 odd soldiers, 65,000 odd horses. 18 such Akshauhinis were destroyed in the Mahabharata war. But here Kartavirya Arjuna himself had 17 Akshauhinis, it is said. So 17 such elephants, chariots, horses, foot soldiers, and so on. And this glorious Parashurama, he is so powerful that it is said he destroyed all of them single-handedly. Whatever came in his direction, he was quick as wind. It is said that his axe would just fly everywhere, and all the warriors were falling down one after another with their arms and thighs and everything severed, and the whole army was lying on the field. And finally, this Kartavirya Arjuna realized that he has to fight himself, so he came out rushing forward in rage, and he has 1,000 arms, as we said, Sahasra Bahu, and he took a bow with 500 arrows. He was able to fit to 500 bows because of his 1,000 arms, and with that he was launching 500 arrows at the same time towards Parashurama. But however, Parashurama, who is the foremost in terms of wielding weapons, he destroyed all of them simultaneously, and then with this hard axe, that is with this Parashu, it is said that he chopped off all the arms of this Kartavirya Arjuna, who came rushing in battle. And then finally, just as the peak of the mountain can be chopped off, he literally chopped off the head of this Kartavirya Arjuna. And then all his sons and everybody ran in fear, and he was finished off. After that, he went about and killed all the allies of Kartavirya Arjuna. That is why he killed 21 times. So this is the brutal terror that Parashurama unleashed on the wicked King Kartavirya. So then after doing all this, he goes back, bringing back this cow of plenty, this Kamadhenu, to his father. So that was the purpose why he went. So we can see how Parashurama is meted out justice, but in a disproportionate way. He has killed so many for the sake of this one cow. Of course, the activity of the king in snatching away the cow without even the permission of the sage was not right, and he deserved to be punished. But to punish him in this way, and also to kill all his armies and kill so many thousands and thousands of people and many Kshatriyas, was a disproportionate act in return for what he had done. But that is exactly the purpose of Parashurama. It is said that Parashurama appeared to remove the burden on earth of all unrighteous beings, even if they were only mildly sinful. So anytime when there is sin increasing, then suddenly there is a retribution, and people wonder why it seems disproportionate. But it is due to the accrued sinful activities of many people, and suddenly there is a reckoning. And so now too, with so many different types of people engaging in corruption of all kinds, if there is a great reckoning and there is great natural disaster and so on, people wonder why it happens. But then there is always an intelligence with which the universe functions, and sometimes burden of such people is removed in what seems to be a disproportionate way, but in the overall balance it is exactly what is necessary. So Parashurama therefore also chopped off and killed so many people, and he brought the cow Kamadhenu back. But his father Jamadagni, as we saw, he was a calm person. So Satyavati, the mother, got a boon that the son will be calm, only the grandson will be fierce. So the son Jamadagni, who is the sage, he is a calm sage, and he is not happy necessarily with the vengeance shown by his son Parashurama. So he says, "Oh Parashurama, this is a great sin you have committed by killing so many people, so many kings especially." He said, "We Brahmanas are meant to be forgiving. That is the quality of a sage. If we are not forgiving, then we have no virtue left." So he says nicely that forgiveness is the glory of a sage. Forgiveness is what makes the Supreme Lord pleased. And therefore, you have to cultivate forgiveness. So, of course, Parashurama, being a partial manifestation of Bhagavan, is not that he is not aware of it, but it is his mission to engage in such violence for fulfilling the divine purpose of his avatar. But it is the duty of the sage Jamadagni, who is the father, as a Brahmana, to give his teaching, which is his divine purpose. So he says, forgiveness is the jewel that a Brahmana is supposed to wear, and that is generally the right instruction. We cannot imitate Parashurama, who is a special avatar as we see, who is meant to bring justice. Normally, what Jamadagni says is the right quality, that one has to be forgiving and unconditionally loving, even if someone else comes and does injustice to us, as long as we can handle it and it is not affecting us in any serious way, we can forgive them. And if it does, we can respond only to the extent it is necessary to make our life comfortable and not having any major obstacle, but not go out of the way to inflict punishment and so on. So that is the principle that Jamadagni is saying here. We have to forgive. He says, Kshamaya rochate lakshmir brahmi sauri yatha prabha kshaminam ashu bhagavan tushyate haririshvaraha. So by forgiveness, the Supreme Lord Hari is instantly pleased. If we are forgiving, he is pleased. If we are in the mode of retribution, he is not pleased with it. So that's the general instruction he gives for all of us, in fact. And then he instructs Parashurama to go and atone for what you have done. He says, go to various holy places which are associated with the Supreme Lord Achyuta. He says, Tirtha Samsevaya Chamho Jahyanga Achyuta Chetanaha. So whatever place is connected with Achyuta, the Supreme Being Narayana, go to such holy places and atone for what you have done. So this is the instruction Jamadagni gives to his son, being the father, who is a sagely being. And of course, Parashurama, being the son of the sage, he'd listen to his father and he'll go on a pilgrimage to all the holy places. And then after he comes back, what happens? And meanwhile, what happens to the other son? So we saw that this is the story of Parashurama, who is born to Jamadagni, who is in turn born to Satyavati through the oblation that was meant for the mother-in-law. But meanwhile, the mother-in-law drank the oblation meant for Satyavati, and it was prophesied that she will have a sagely being, which is Vishwamitra. So his story of how Vishwamitra is born and also what happens to Parashurama will continue in the next chapter. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.